In 1901, divers pulled something impossible from a Roman shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera. It was a corroded bronze mechanism so technologically advanced that nothing like it would appear again for another 1,400 years. When scientists finally decoded what it did, they couldn't believe it. This wasn't just some ancient tool. It was a computer, built in 100 BC. But here's what keeps me awake at night. If the ancient Greeks could build working computers 2,000 years ago, what else were they capable of? And more importantly, what knowledge did we lose? Because the Antikythera mechanism isn't alone. There are structures, artifacts, and techniques scattered across our ancient world that make absolutely no sense. Things that shouldn't exist. Things that challenge everything we think we know about our ancestors. Let me show you something that'll change how you see ancient civilizations forever. The Great Pyramid of Giza weighs approximately 6 million tons. That's the weight of about 1,500 Empire State Buildings. And it was built with such precision that the base is level to within just 2.1 centimeters across its entire 230-meter length. You couldn't achieve that accuracy today with laser-guided equipment. But that's not even the strangest part. The granite stones in the King's Chamber were quarried from Aswan, which is 800 kilometers away. Some of these blocks weigh 80 tons. 80 tons! And somehow, around 2560 BC, Egyptian workers transported these massive stones across the desert, up the Nile, and then lifted them 43 meters into the air to place them with millimeter precision. Modern engineers have tried to replicate these feats. They've failed. In 1978, a Japanese team attempted to build a small pyramid using ancient Egyptian techniques. They gave up and brought in helicopters and bulldozers. They still couldn't match the precision. So how did the Egyptians do it? The conventional explanation is that they used copper tools, wooden sledges, and thousands of workers over 20 years. But when you actually do the math, this explanation starts to fall apart. Mark Lenner, an Egyptologist who has spent decades studying the pyramids, calculated that workers would have had to place one 2.5-ton block every 2.5 minutes, working 10 hours a day for 20 years straight. That's not construction, that's superhuman. And before you think this is just about Egypt, let me take you somewhere that'll blow that theory wide open. Halfway around the world, high in the Andes Mountains of Peru, there's a place called Sacsayhuaman. It's a fortress wall made of stones so precisely fitted together that you can't slide a sheet of paper between them. No mortar, just stone on stone, cut and placed with impossible accuracy. The largest stone weighs 120 tons. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. These aren't rectangular blocks, they're irregular, multifaceted polygonal stones, each one unique, each one fitting perfectly with its neighbors like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Some of these stones have 12 different angles. Creating something like this would require advanced computer modeling today. The Inca built it sometime around 1400 AD. Ask archaeologists how they did it, and you'll get the same answer: we don't know. Christopher Dunn, a precision engineer who has studied ancient stonework for 40 years, examined these sites and found something disturbing. The precision of the cuts and the smoothness of the surfaces suggest these stones were machined, not chiseled. He found evidence of what appears to be saw marks on stones that standard archaeology says were shaped by pounding them with harder rocks. Let that sink in for a second. We're talking about civilizations that supposedly didn't have the wheel, let alone power tools, creating stonework that would challenge modern engineering firms. Now, you might be thinking this is all just about impressive construction, but what if I told you these ancient builders might have understood physics and astronomy better than we did until just a few centuries ago? Remember that Antikythera mechanism I mentioned at the start? For almost 100 years after its discovery, nobody could figure out what it was. The thing was crushed, corroded, and broken into 82 fragments. It looked like random gears and bronze scraps. Then, in 2006, researchers at Cardiff University used advanced X-ray imaging to see inside the mechanism. What they found was staggering. This wasn't just a gear system, it was the world's first analog computer designed to predict astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance. It had at least 30 bronze gears that worked together to model the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. It could predict solar eclipses and even accounted for the irregular orbit of the moon. The technology inside this device wouldn't be matched until medieval astronomical clocks appeared in the 14th century, more than 1,400 years later. But how did the ancient Greeks develop this technology? And why do we have nothing else like it from that entire period? It's as if someone dropped a smartphone in the year 1000 AD, and then that knowledge just vanished. Except that's not quite accurate, because there are whispers of this knowledge everywhere if you know where to look. The Nebra sky disk, discovered in Germany in 1999, is a bronze disk created around 1600 BC that depicts astronomical phenomena with shocking sophistication. It shows the sun, moon, stars, and what researchers believe represents the solar barge of ancient mythology, but it also appears to mark the summer and winter solstices. This was supposedly created by Bronze Age people we considered primitive. The Baghdad battery, found in 1936, is a ceramic jar with a copper cylinder and iron rod that many researchers believe could have functioned as a galvanic cell, essentially an ancient battery dating back to around 250 BC. If ancient Mesopotamians had electricity, even at a basic level, what were they using it for? These aren't isolated oddities. They're pieces of a puzzle that suggest our ancestors knew far more than we've given them credit for. Now here's where this story takes a darker turn. The Library of Alexandria, once the greatest repository of human knowledge in the ancient world, held somewhere between 400,000 and 1 million scrolls. It contained the collected wisdom of the Egyptian, Greek, Persian, and Roman civilizations. Scientists, mathematicians, astronomers, and philosophers from across the known world came there to study. Then it burned. Scholars debate when and how it was destroyed, but the result is undeniable. We lost thousands of years of accumulated knowledge in what might be the greatest intellectual catastrophe in human history. We're not talking about myths and legends. We're talking about scientific treatises, mathematical proofs, astronomical observations, engineering manuals, and philosophical works that took centuries to create. Gone. When you realize what was lost at Alexandria, those mysterious ancient technologies start to make sense. What if they weren't anomalies? What if they were common? What if the ancient world possessed sophisticated knowledge that we've simply forgotten because the records were destroyed? Consider this. Greek mathematician Archimedes, who lived from 287 to 212 BC, invented concepts that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Renaissance. He calculated pi, understood principles of calculus that wouldn't be formalized for another 2,000 years, and designed war machines so effective they held off Roman armies. When a Roman soldier killed him during the siege of Syracuse, humanity lost one of the greatest minds to ever live. How many other Archimedes were there whose work was lost forever? The mathematician Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of Earth around 240 BC with remarkable accuracy. He didn't have satellites or modern instruments. He used shadows, geometry, and pure reasoning. These people weren't primitive, they were brilliant. But let's talk about something that'll really mess with your understanding of the ancient world. The Piri-Reis map. In 1929, scholars found a fragment of a world map in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace. It was created by Ottoman Admiral Piri-Reis in 1513, and it depicted the coastlines of South America and Antarctica with eerie accuracy. But here's the problem. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, and the portion of the coast shown on the map depicts what the land looks like beneath the ice. We didn't have technology to see beneath Antarctic ice until the 1950s using modern seismographic equipment.
So how did a 16th century map show the true coastline of a continent wouldn't be discovered for another 300 years, let alone what it looked like under ice that had been there for thousands of years? Piri Reis himself provided an answer. He noted on the map that he compiled it from over 20 source maps, some of which dated back to the time of Alexander the Great or earlier. In other words, he was copying ancient maps that somehow had this knowledge. Charles Hapgood, a historian who studied ancient maps, found multiple examples of cartographic knowledge that shouldn't have existed. Maps that showed accurate longitudes centuries before we had chronometers precise enough to calculate them. Maps that depicted ice-free coastlines from the last ice age. Someone, somewhere, had mapped the world with remarkable precision thousands of years ago. Then that knowledge was lost, only surviving in fragments copied and recopied through the centuries. Now I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds like
ancient aliens territory. But here's the thing. We don't need to invoke aliens or lost civilizations like Atlantis to explain these mysteries. What we need is humility about how advanced our ancestors actually were. Modern humans, anatomically identical to us, have existed for at least 300,000 years. Behavioral modernity, everything that makes us psychologically who we are today, developed at least 70,000 years ago. We've only had recorded history for about 5,000 years. That means there are 65,000 years of human behavior and potentially 295,000 years of human existence that we know almost nothing about. How many civilizations rose and fell in that time? How much knowledge was gained and lost? The ancient mysteries we've talked about today aren't proof of lost super-civilizations or alien intervention. They're evidence that the people who came before us were every bit as intelligent, creative, and capable as we are. They looked at the same stars, asked the same questions, and found answers using the tools available to them. What we call primitive civilizations built computers, calculated the size of Earth, created batteries, mapped continents, and constructed monuments that still stand while modern buildings crumble after decades. The real mystery isn't how they did these things. The real mystery is why we're so shocked that they could. Maybe it's time we stopped underestimating our ancestors and started asking a different question. What else don't we know? What other knowledge is sitting in museums, misidentified and misunderstood, waiting for someone with the right perspective to see what it really is? Because I guarantee you, the Antikythera mechanism wasn't the only ancient computer. It's just the only one we found. And that should terrify and excite you in equal measure. Thank you for listening and for uncovering underground treasure.